Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. Today is October 1st. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh, this summer has gone by so fast. My name is Lisa Honka, and I have a company called Your Key to Senior Living Options. I help seniors find independent, assisted, or memory care communities. And I have been working with Jackie for about 3 years. We met a couple years ago, and I said, I love your organization. I love the fact that you help families directly. And we partnered on quite a few fundraising events, and Jackie's been a great support to my families, and I've been helping her families work through the disease process of memory loss. And we are so excited today to have you, Jackie, to explain what you do and explain about understanding the signs and the symptoms of dementia. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, Jackie, first, and then we can go into our PowerPoint. And at the end, we have time for questions from our audience. You can always write them down, and we'll see them in the chat, or you can ask them of Jackie. But thanks, everybody, for joining us, and I'm excited to get started. So, Jackie, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. As Lisa said, my name is Jackie Kuhn. I am a community educator for the Alzheimer's Family Organization. And I retired here in the Villages when I moved here 6 years ago. And my background is I have 48 years in long-term care. I'm an executive director, social worker. So my history is totally wrapped around seniors. And when the opportunity came to be a community educator for the AFO, I saw my life continue to begin and to serve the elderly. The AFO, again, is a small, very small, not-for-profit organization. And my job as a community educator is that I go around and I speak to churches, organizations, clubs, staff, anybody who wants to have a better understanding of Alzheimer's. And we all know that it is something that isn't going away. Almost everybody you talk to is affected by that, by either a friend, neighbor, family member. And so what I do is I try to offer the knowledge and information to be able to help our caregivers get through this journey. We know it's a journey nobody picks, nobody checks it off and says, hey, I'd love to go through this. It's a very difficult journey, and it's a journey that no one wants to take alone, but many do. So our job basically is to help the caregiver. That's what our family stands for in the middle of the Alzheimer's Family Organization. We know that the caregiver is the one who will remember this journey. It is not the one with the diagnosis. So we know that the caregiver has a lot on their plate. And so our job is to basically give them that support, encouragement. We offer support groups in our designated counties. We initiate support groups. We train support facilitators. And we also, start new ones in any area that would desire to have one. Support groups are so important to our caregivers. To be able to know that others are going through this journey at the same time they are, and for them to have others who can give them advice, ideas. It's important that they have a place to go that they feel safe, to be able to say what they need to say, cry if they need to cry, laugh if they need to laugh. And so we know that this does not come without sacrifice. And particularly in this time of COVID, many caregivers are struggling with additional things besides just caring for their loved ones. If they have them placed or if they still have them at home, things in their lives have changed, just like they've changed in ours. So it's a very difficult journey. And the AFO and in my role is to try to help them get through that journey. If it's one-on-one or if it's by groups or if it's just by education, we want people to understand this disease process. We want people to understand that they're not alone. We want people to know that there are people out there for them to help them get through this difficult time. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. We are strictly funded by grants and fundraisers with the AFO. And so we do have a big walk that we do in March, not knowing what that this year will bring with that. But we do know that, you know, people are starting to get out. So we hope that it's something that will be able to take place. But again, I love what I do. I love my families. I feel for my families. And I want them to always know that we're there for them. And if we can be just a piece of that peace that they get going in on this journey, we're blessed to be able to be a part of that. So that's a little bit about me. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. And with the first slide again, as I had mentioned, this is the AFO, the Alzheimer's Family Organization. Again, we are, family is our middle name, and therefore what I shared earlier, that's what we talk about when we mention our caregivers. And so we know that it's very important to have people surround us, encourage us, and be supportive of us. So we're going to talk today. I appreciate Lisa and the team and your Key to Senior Living Options to be able to, we're going to do kind of a series of things back to basics. Many new people are being diagnosed, and we know that many times we're unsure of what it is we're looking for. What are the things that are going to take place that we know is going to be important to them to be able to recognize this journey. So today we're going to talk about the 10 signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's, and what do people look for, and what are some things that we need to be aware of, and things that we can do as we begin to recognize these signs and symptoms. Okay, slide 1. I guess the one thing that everybody associates when they say they have Alzheimer's is memory loss. And I know many people don't always understand the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. And to me, it's important that we know that difference. If I was somebody and I came up to you and I said, I have cancer, the first question we ask somebody is, what kind of cancer is it? Because we know there are many different types of cancer. So that's no different with Alzheimer's or dementia. Somebody will say, my loved one has dementia. Nobody says what kind of dementia is it. They all assume it's Alzheimer's. And it isn't always. There are over 120 different types of dementias at this time. So Alzheimer's is probably the most prevalent, but it is not the only one. And we will probably be talking about those in further detail as we continue this series, but we have frontal lobe, we have stroke induced, we have Lewy bodies. There are just so many different types of dementias, but you can have more than one at one time. But with all of these dementias, most of them have some type of memory loss. So when we think of memory loss, I guess my question to you today is, did you forget anything this week? Have you forgotten anything today? We all have a sense of memory loss. And when we talk about memory loss, it's like, did I forget something? And then was I never able to recall it? Or did I forget something and then I was able to recall it? You know, when we go through these 10 signs and symptoms, the one thing that I'm going to ask of everyone is that don't self-diagnose yourself, because we're really critical when we have those moments of these signs and symptoms to think, oh my goodness, I must have Alzheimer's. I give this example when I talk a lot, is that one night I was watching TV and this commercial came on and it said, if you have these signs and symptoms, you have depression. And I thought, okay, great. So all these signs and symptoms came on the TV. I wasn't depressed before the commercial, but by the time the commercial was over, I was completely depressed, because I probably had 10 of the 15 signs and symptoms they had listed on the TV. And so I had myself already diagnosed. And so it's important that going through these, we don't look at that and go, oh, that's me. Because a part of this comes with aging, a part of this comes with just who we are. So it's not always that I've got these signs and symptoms, but when I do and I see them and I see them consistently are the times that we begin to need to be concerned. And we're going to talk about how we can track this as well. So when we talk about memory loss, we all forget things. In a normal day, I could say probably 2 times a day, I have forgotten something. I forgot where I placed the key fob to the car. I've forgotten where I laid my purse. How many of you call your phone because you can't find it? We all have these days that we just can't pull it together, and our memory just isn't what we thought it was. How many of you walk into a room and forget why you walked in there? We all do that. Or I can be sitting there and thinking, okay, what do I need to do today? I'm a sticky note person. I have to write everything down. If it's not written down, I'm not going to be responsible to remember it. So to help my memory, I write things down. I have to jot things down. How many of you are sleeping or go to bed with something on your mind and you can't sleep because somebody asked you about somebody's name and you thought, I know that name, I just can't remember it, and you lay there all night trying to remember that name? You go to sleep, about 3 o'clock in the morning, it comes to you. And then you think, well, now, can I remember it till morning? Or am I going to forget it again? So I keep a pad and paper by my bedside and write those things down as they come to mind so my head can go back to rest. And by morning, if I can read my scribbling, by morning, I can remember that person's name. But we're all forgetful. A name or a face may be familiar, but you can't place the name. Again, you know, walk into a room and forget why you walked in there. How many of you have been dazed off while you're driving and miss your turn and can't find where you need to go back to get to where you were headed? We all have those moments of memory loss. Sometimes they affect our jobs. They affect what we're doing. I am not techie savvy, and I have to write step by step what I'm doing on a computer. Even I'll draw the little icons just so I know that this is where I need to go, because I'm just not fluent in it. And so it's important that, you know, when we're looking at our memory, what are we doing to help with our memory loss? We strongly encourage through any of these signs and symptoms that you journal what is happening. Many people say, well, I don't like to write everything down. And I say, well, if you're going to try to track your memory loss, if you're trying to determine whether or not you have a concern, it is a good idea to journal these issues. You put the day, you put the time, because maybe the time of day is where you have mornings may be worse than afternoons, or afternoons worse than mornings. Maybe it's not every day. Families say, well, it doesn't happen that often. Well, if it doesn't happen that often, then you won't have much in your journal, but you will have a history. And you might begin to see a pattern of these memory losses. You know, if you have a loved one and say, Dad got lost in the car today. It doesn't seem like a very big deal. But if I begin to document those days, and maybe it's only happening once every 6 months, maybe once a year, but then all of a sudden it becomes a pattern, and it becomes every other month. Then all of a sudden it's monthly. And then now all of a sudden it's weekly. And at least that way you've got a pattern that you can follow in your journal to know that this is what is happening. So memory loss is probably the one sign that people associate with the most. I had a family member in one of my facilities who the husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he eventually passed away. Well, 2 years later, his wife came in and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and then passed away. After the mother passed away, the daughter called me every time she forgot something, because she thought, this is happening to me now. This is what I'm going to be going through. And it scared her, because as we see people with memory loss, we think, how easy is that for us all to become forgetful? So memory loss is probably the key sign that we're going to probably associate with as it happens. My husband doesn't like it when I share this story, but he's an avid golfer, and so he's got a routine with his golfing schedule on the day that he golfs. And it's step by step, and he knows exactly what he needs to do. And one day, he comes walking in, and he had received a phone call. And so he was on his phone, and he come walking in, and he gave me this look like, help me, I got to find something. And I says, what? And he says, I can't find my phone. And I looked at him and I said, you're talking on it. And it just completely, he just got so befuddled, because it was like, you have a routine, but something took you out of your routine and it affected your memory. So we're all, focused on what we can remember, what we can't. Families will ask a lot of times, well, what are things that I can do to sharpen my mind? What are things that I can do to help with my memory loss? And I think we all can come up with ideas of things that we can do. You got crossword puzzles, you've got word search. A lot of people play cards, board games. You have things that you can do. We had a one couple that we encouraged to do adult coloring. And they thought that was really fun. And they did some beautiful pictures. And they said, we do a great job, but we don't know what to do with them. And I said, well, when your grandkids send you a colored picture, what do you do with it? And he said, we hang it on the refrigerator. And I said, then send your grandkids your pictures. I bet they'll hang them on their refrigerator. So they took pride in what they did, but it was a way of sharpening their mind, helping with their memory, doing things as, easy as the adult coloring, the card games. We all have those things that we can do that we're doing on a routine basis to help sharpen our mind. So memory loss is one of the things that, again, stand very high on our symptoms and signs as far as dealing with Alzheimer's. Second slide. Problems with language. Many times you'll hear somebody with Alzheimer's run their words together, or they repeat their words. They repeat repeat their stories. They have difficulty putting words together, a sentence. They might get 3 or 4 words correct, but they can't finish the sentence. And again, these are things to journal. These are things that are important to remember that, you know, this took place. And it's hard sometimes because we want to correct them, but we need to let them try to search for the right words. We need to let them search for the content. What is this sentence supposed to mean? We want them to continue to do that. So in early stages, as we begin to see people not be able to put sentences together, not be able to complete a thought, are things that, you know, we have to begin to look at and say, you know, in combination with memory loss, there's something going on. Something's not connecting for them to be able to put their words together. And so language becomes a very prominent example of somebody that something's not right. Something's going on with my loved one. Because this, again, is happening more in the mornings, afternoons, nighttime. It just depends on every individual. Everybody's journey is different. So these are things, again, that you would want to journal time and day in order to be able to really keep in touch with what is happening with your loved one. Next slide. Difficulty performing familiar tasks. I think it's real important that we become observant. You know, maybe my mom was an excellent cook, and all of a sudden now she can't put all her recipes together. She can't remember. Many women cook without recipes, but they're not able to complete what they were making. I had a family member give me a great example one time that was really an eye-opener for him. And that was, they were sitting at the dining room table for their evening meal. And she got up and she says, I'm going to go warm my plate up. It's not as hot as I want it. This wasn't unusual. This was something that, you know, nobody thought anything about. But she never returned to the dining room table. And he got to thinking, well, where is she? What's going on? So he got up and he walked into the kitchen and he found his wife standing in the middle of the kitchen floor. And she looked one way, and then she turned and she was looking another way. Then she turned and she was looking another way. She could not figure out where the microwave was. She forgot completely what it looked like. How natural is it for us to put something in the microwave, hit that button, hit start, and it's automatic? But all of a sudden, it wasn't automatic for her. It shot a red light to him. This was something, again, he would document to say, this is something that, you know, was totally out of character for them. So doing those familiar tasks, even driving a car, second nature. You know where you're going, you get in the car and you head out, and then all of a sudden you get turned around, or all of a sudden you're not where you thought you were going to be. So those are common things that we do. Things that as we look at our adult loved one and say, you know, there's no way he or she would forget how to do this. But all of a sudden they have. Or they're not being able to complete it completely. They can get halfway there and then they can't remember. So it's very important as we observe our loved ones that we're looking at their daily tasks, their daily routine. Is this still normal? Or are we seeing things in this routine that aren't normal? Are there things that we're now concerned with? You hear stories all the time about somebody who turns the stove on to cook something, walks away, and the stove is still on, or the oven, or they've left the water running. There are things that we see and recognize in normal routine. Now, what happens a lot in families is that we're around it so much, we don't think about it. We just kind of, let it bounce off our shoulder. And so we don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. And so it's important that, again, we become very observant to their routine, to their normal routine, to what kind of changes are happening and taking place. Performing familiar tasks, something we should assume is so easy, has now become very difficult for them. And we have a hard time looking at them and saying, something's not right. Something's not right. But let's be documenting that. Okay, next slide. Disorientation of time and place. Wow, that kind of hits home for all of us, doesn't it? How many times a day do you think, what time of day is it? It's got to be almost mid-afternoon, and you look at the clock and it's only 11. Sometimes our days go by fast, sometimes they go by so slow. So we all can become disoriented to time and place. It's very important that, again, this is a key factor for people with early onset, is that we begin to recognize and we journal when they forget time and place. I mean, if they say to you, "Where am I?" and you say, "Well, you're home." "Well, this is not my home," they respond. They may be referring to their home that they were born in, or the home in which they raised their children. So they get disoriented to their place and time. Many times and you'll hear me say this throughout the series, that many times they're living back in those days of 20s or 30s. And that's why their disorientation is so evident, because if they think they're living at home, but they're not calling your home their home, then we know that they're thinking of a different home. They're thinking of a home way back when. And so it's important that, again, as they become disoriented, to not, argue with them to the point of saying, "This is your house." "Well, no, it's not my house." "Yes, it is your house." "No, it's not my house." We want to make sure that we're keeping in mind where they are at the time that they become disoriented. Are they disoriented back when they were young? Are they disoriented to the back of their mid-years or their place of when they worked? It's important that when we look at disorientation of time and place, that we have to visualize and have to find and have a sense of where they are coming from. Because they know they're right. If they don't think this is their home, there's nothing you're going to do to change their mind that it is. So we all become disoriented to time and place. We used to, when we went on vacation, I took my watch off, laid it on the counter, and didn't put it back on for a week. So all week I would be a little bit disoriented to time. What time of day is it? And we all do those things that might seem normal to us because it's just situational. And that's where we need to observe too, is this disorientation of time and place something that just happens infrequently, and now it's happening more. So we need to be very conscientious in observing our loved one to their disorientation of time and place. Next slide. Problems with abstract thinking. I have a lot of people say, "You know what, my husband or my wife was the smartest person I ever knew. They could put a toy together without the directions. They were very techy. You could just give them anything to do and they could do it." But now all of a sudden, they can't brush their teeth. All of a sudden, they're not sure what to do with their hands. All of a sudden, they're unable to use the restroom, which would be something very normal. So when we talk about their abstract thinking, they're not able to think past of where they are. And at that moment, they may be disoriented. They may have a lapse of memory, but they are not able to think outside the box. They are not able to do the things that were so normal in their life before that it becomes recognizable to you that they are not able to think this through. They cannot process what you're saying. You know, maybe it became so easy for them in the past to be able to do plumbing or electrician or things that, you know, just came to them second nature. And now all of a sudden they're just not able to do. They don't understand and they cannot think outside the box. So we have to, again, these are things that we want to be able to journal. We want to be able to document because it's important. We find a pattern in this, or we find, you know, some background on this as to when this started. So problems with abstract thinking are something that we, again, have to observe and have to acknowledge. And again, we want to go back to where they are at that point in time. In their thinking, to know that, you know, this is coming from a different place than what we thought. So problems with abstract thinking are very easy to observe. They're very easy to acknowledge that this process just is not there any longer. Next slide. Misplacing things. Well, let's talk about misplacing things. How many of you misplace things? We all do. We misplace our keys, we misplace our phone. How many of you have trouble finding your car in the parking lot when you go get groceries? Or you run into Walmart and now all of a sudden you can't find your car? How many of you hit the panic button to say, you know, that's the only way I'm going to be able to find my car? I lift my back trunk. I push my trunk button and the hood goes up and I'm assuming that's going to be my car. And so, you know, it's important, misplacing things. You know, we say, I'm going to find one location and this is where everything goes. My purse, my keys, my phone, everything's in one place so that I am not going to lose it. And what happens? We still lose it because we forgot to put it in the basket or wherever it was that we had said we were going to put it. And so all of a sudden I'm misplacing things. How many times have you misplaced something and thought, you know what, I'm never going to find it? You give up, you relax, maybe a week later, all of a sudden it's right there, almost right in front of your face, and you're going, how did I ever miss that? How did that not come to me sooner? So we all misplace things. I think that's probably one of the most common symptoms that and signs that we see in people in misplacing items. I had to laugh. My little granddaughter, when she was here visiting one day, she was probably only about 2 at the time, but she took all my canned goods and put them in my TV cabinet with the door. And I thought, I'd go to find something and I go, what happened? I know I had those vegetables. I know I had that tomato sauce, but where did it all go? And behold, after long searches, we found them in my TV cabinet. So we all misplace things, and sometimes things get moved. I mean, we're so quick to say to our spouses or to our kids, what'd you do with that? Where'd you leave that? Where'd you lay that? And unbeknown, it wasn't their fault at all, it was ours. So misplacing things is a sign, a great sign, that maybe something else is going on. But it's also something that's very normal. So when I talk about misplacing things, I'm talking about, again, we're journaling this. And all of a sudden, once a year, not a biggie. Once every 6 months, not a biggie. All of a sudden, it's becoming monthly, and all of a sudden, it's becoming weekly. And misplacing things can become daily. And so it's very important as we journal that, so we can, again, collect that information about these changes in our loved one. So misplacing things is a very common sign, even to someone not being diagnosed, but it's one that becomes very evident, more so as they get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I had a father-in-law who was in and out, and then he had the diagnosis with Alzheimer's. Well, he still wanted to drive, so my mother-in-law took all the keys. Well, Grandpa used to drive cars back and forth for this dealership. So he had his wits enough about him that he went and had more keys made so that he could have his keys, and he would hide his keys. Of course, he couldn't find his keys then, but he would get more keys made. So it's, we have to be creative. We have to make sure that things don't get misplaced. The last thing you want them to do is to hide your keys and you don't have any keys. So we want to make sure that, again, misplacing things is a sign that we see normally in our lives, but we also see it in the lives of our loved ones with the diagnosis. Next slide, please. Changing in mood and behavior. Wow. This, again, is something that happens very normally. That's such a word. We all have changes in our mood and behavior. We all have days that, hey, I don't feel like being very friendly today. Or, you know what, I'm just going to be in the best mood today, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to help others. And, so we all have different changes in behavior. But when we're looking at changes in behavior of our loved ones that we may be looking at with these signs and symptoms, it's a change that says, that is totally out of character for my mother or my dad. That is something that they would have never done. You hear a lot of stories about, my mom was a Christian lady. She never said a cuss word in her life. And now all she can do is cuss. That's a change in mood and behavior. That's a change in their character. My dad used to be the meanest man around, and now he's the kindest man around. Maybe all of a sudden, we're just very docile. Maybe we've been very active, and then all of a sudden, we're not wanting to do anything. So, our change in our mood and behavior is very obvious to notice. You know your loved one better than anybody, that you can notice the change for the good or the bad, or the opposite of the normal, to be able to say, that is really not something I expected. That is not true to who my mom and dad are. So that would be something to document. There's this huge change in their mood or their behavior. And to be able to, say, I wonder when this happened, but I have it documented, so I'm not questioning when it happened. But it's something to monitor. Is this change every day? Is this change weekly? Is this change monthly? How often does this behavior change? Many times it's something that just snaps and doesn't last long, but it's still a change. It's a change that, again, is not normal for your loved one. Next slide. Changes in personality. Wow. You see these little faces up there, and how many times do we see the expressions a day? You know, if all of a sudden, again, and a little bit kind of goes with their mood and behavior, changes in personality, is that this is not something that is common. You know, my mom's always happy-go-lucky, and all of a sudden she's teary and weepy. My mom's always dad's always in the good spirits, and all of a sudden he's mean and he's unkind. You know, these are changes, again, that we as family can recognize easier than anyone else. Facial expressions are something that we become very observant of with our loved ones, because their facial expressions tell us a lot about what is happening with them. Of course, it's difficult now with the mask to be able to read that, but normally looking at these faces, you can tell that, you know, hey, something's not right. Something is not the same. So their personality, as you have known them for 70, 80 years, all of a sudden is different. So those are things, again, we want to be able to focus on and document, to know that, again, this is a big change. Next slide. Poor or decreased judgment. You know, this deals a lot with their physical being, you know, their decreased judgment, walking, unsteady, falling, driving a car, driving a golf cart. These are all things that we begin to look at as poor and decreased judgment. Are their reflexes as they should be to not only keep your loved ones safe, but to keep those around them safe? So again, you know, we talked about leaving the stove on, poor judgment. We talked about leaving, not finding our car, poor judgment. So we want to make sure that, again, we're observing these areas of safety for the loved one, because we want to make sure that something else doesn't happen that's going to injure them or injure someone else. So we want to make sure their safety is foremost what we're concerned with. You know, if we have a resident who is exiting from the house, what precautions do we have in place to make sure they are safe? What are we doing for them at home that is going to allow us to know that, you know, they're okay? Have we set up our home to be safe? Have we set up our bathroom to be safe? It's important that, you know, as we look at these things, again, documenting, you know, all of a sudden, mom or dad aren't making good choices. All of a sudden, they're doing things that are not normal for them. So it's important to, again, make sure that we look at their decreased judgment. We want to keep them safe at all times. Next slide. Loss of initiative, and this is probably a very common one that is easy to observe. It's something that's well worth the documentation, is to say, you know, all of a sudden, you know, hey, mom was always so active, just busy, 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 and now she's a couch potato. You know, dad has always been very active in physical activities, golfing, pickleball, other things that, again, are very important to him, and all of a sudden he has no desire to be a part of that. He has no desire to do any of that or to socialize with anybody. We've always had a lot of company, and all of a sudden we don't have any company. We just don't desire to have people in our home. So when we see a real loss of initiative, you know, with a lot of things to be concerned with as far as their mental status, that something isn't right, something's just not normal. So, you know, these are all signs and symptoms that we look at. So when we look at all 10 of these signs and symptoms, the thing that when I encourage the journaling is that how easy it is for us if we decide it's time to go to the doctor or it's time to see a neurologist, that I come with a history, I come with information, I come with dates, times, so that they can put a pattern together. The doctors need as much information as they can get. They can only diagnose with what they have. And so it's important that we come prepared, and they know that we're observing these things. I had my sister was just recently diagnosed with early onset dementia. And when we think back, and we all do this, we think back after somebody's been diagnosed to say, well, you know what? I can remember 10 years back when this happened, and we didn't think anything about it. We laughed about it. We thought it was funny they got lost, or we thought it was funny that, they did something that was abnormal in their normal life, and we didn't take it seriously. But once somebody's diagnosed, we go back and we think, wow, maybe this started back then. Maybe this started, at this point in time, and we just didn't see it. And that's the important thing about the journaling, is to be able to document this pattern, this history, to be able to know, maybe you don't write in it but once every 6 months, but that's okay. It's important as that begins to be a monthly documentation and a weekly documentation and then a daily documentation, that it's important to the doctor to know, how long this has been going on. Because just like with any other diagnosis, we hear so much about cancer, about people who have had headaches, never did anything about it. 5 years later, they get a diagnosis that they have cancer. What if we'd have done something earlier? What if we'd have tried getting them to a doctor sooner? But we pass so many things on because they seem so normal to us. And it's important that, again, that's why that journaling helps so much in knowing what's going on with them. And it might turn out to be nothing and you can throw the journal away, but at least you're tracking something and you're trying to get some type of important information down that you can share with the doctor, and realizing that you're seeing these signs and symptoms, you're seeing these things, and they are now a pattern. And what is it we can do about it, and where are we? And at what, we'll go into stages in another series, but, there are different stages, and then looking at that and saying, sometimes they're already in that stage with cancer, they're already in stage 4, and you've just had the diagnosis. What happened to 1, 2, and 3? And so it's important as we look at these signs and symptoms, don't diagnose yourself. Find these as a pattern. Find these as a tool to be able to say, these are things I need to watch in my loved one as I notice changes in their life.
Jackie, thank you. Outstanding. I learned so much. Thank you. Your way of guiding us through this is amazing. So thank you for making it so clear and concise. I want to open up for any questions. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? You can unmute your box up in the corner because everyone is muted now. Does anybody have any questions? Well, while we're waiting for questions, do you have one, Vicki, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Jackie, a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If a doctor's prescribing a PET scan, for example,
Mm-hmm.
have you heard, I know you're not a medical doctor, but have you heard that could actually determine what type of Alzheimer's they have, or a dementia that they would have?
I think that a lot of a doctor would utilize that to be able to diagnose some form of dementia. They are able to pinpoint it down. Like I said, my sister was just diagnosed and she had an MRI and information, and they determined it was frontal lobe. Just because of the journaling. I talked to my brother-in-law and I said, you got to journal the things. So the doctor kind of knows, is it dealing with her emotions that we're seeing changes? Is it dealing with her verbal? Is it dealing with her memory? Is it, what part of the brain is it affecting? And there are tests out there, you know, that, again, going to probably a specialist, a neurologist, your primary would probably refer you to be able to narrow it down to what it is. So I think they are able to determine what type, because otherwise, how do you know what to treat? You know,
Right. Yeah.
and so many times we just can't throw medications out there. And to be honest, there hasn't been a new medication for Alzheimer's in now 19 years.
Really.
So there is nothing new out there for this.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I think a lot of it depends, again, like I said, there are over 120 different types of
Right.
dementias. How do
Yeah.
we treat them? What do we do for them?
Mhm.
Because you can have more than one at one time. So yeah,
Right.
I do feel that they can help pinpoint what type it is, because it allows that person, like for my sister with frontal lobe, you know, to be able to determine, how do we work with that? What do
Right.
we determine? I mean, you know, what kind of exercises do we do to help with that? And what are some of the things that we can expect going down this journey with frontal lobe?
Mhm.
You know, because it is different. Dementia affects us in many different ways. And
Right.
so, you know, a lot of doctors will just say it's, you know, cognitive loss, you know, and it just comes with aging. Well, if you have this documented and you have a good journal of what's happening, if it's happening quite a bit, isn't normal. It's not our normal
Right.
process with dementia. But yeah, I think they can determine, you know,
Mhm.
what kind it is.
All right. Thank you, Jackie.
Mhm.
So Jackie, if someone's feeling really overwhelmed, right? They're watching their loved one, they have a diagnosis of memory loss now, and where can they go for support? What do you suggest for people to get support and maybe talk to others like them who are kind of walking through this journey with their loved one?
I think, first of all, they have to, just like with anything else, they have to determine, I need help.
Mhm.
So many people in the homes aren't seeking help because they think, this is my problem and I'm going to deal with it and I don't need anybody's help, and not realizing how important it is that they do seek help. You know, I encourage support groups. There are numerous support groups out there. And I said, as much as I'm saddened with COVID, the one thing it has done is opened up programs like this that anybody in the United States can become a part of and hear information and get education versus just locally. And so I think, you know, it's educating them, giving them people they can communicate with, people that are going on the same journey as they are. It's so important for them to be able to have someone else to talk to and to relate to. You know, it's like sitting around with 20 mothers with a 3-year-old, and they're saying, I don't know how to get my child potty trained. And then all of a sudden you've got 20 mothers' hands going out and saying, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. And so that mother goes home and tries all 20 because something's got to help. You know, we're willing to do and try anything. And that's no different with Alzheimer's. You know, you'll sit around in a support group and somebody will say, I can't get my husband to shower. I can't get my wife to take her medications. And all of a sudden you got everybody in the support group that maybe has already been down that path, giving them ideas and giving them thoughts, because that's encouragement. When people give you things, it's like, you know, wow, I can't wait to try that. That might just help. And so it's important that these support groups allow them to interact. A lot of these people in the support group become best friends forever because they've been down the same journey together. And they know that somebody is going through it that understands exactly my fear and frustration, because I'm telling you, the caregiver needs someone to just vent to. They need someone to hear what they're hearing or what they need to hear. and to be able to encourage them with words and wisdom and support, and directing them in the directions they need to go. Maybe they're thinking, what do I do now? I'm at my wit's end at home. Well, then we need to seek out the resources to be able to allow them to be able to get some comfort. Just like with your key to senior living options, many times I make that referral to say, if nothing else, just get an idea, have a plan B. You don't have to be working plan A, you need a plan B. And that way, when that time comes, you've got the knowledge and the information and the things that need to be found out before you need it. And so people need to first want to be helped. And I think that's what's important.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? So, Jackie, if someone wants to get in touch with you or know more about the Alzheimer's Family Organization, where would they go? Do we have a slide on that?
Yep. Yeah, we got, they can call me. And my phone number is 574-721-1177. And I'll direct them in the direction if they need a support group, if they need a resource. I give them ideas just to be able to allow them to feel like they got some help, some information. And so, yeah, the AFO in our existence is very small, but very powerful.
I agree, very powerful. You've helped thousands of families, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to wrap it up here. We have some upcoming presentations by Jackie. We also have a Savvy Caregiver boot camp coming up, and that'll be on our website. Let's see if Maureen's got it. Oh, here we go. Good. All right. So Dr. Lal from Synexus is going to be talking to us about participating in clinical trials and how that could benefit you or the future generations. Savvy Caregiver, 6-week course coming up. You do have to register for that, and we do have people already registered. Please share this information with people that you think could benefit. It's completely free. It's an amazing presentation, and you do need to be available for all six weeks, but it is limited in space. We're also going to be doing medical planning and asset protection, and that's going to be with a attorney, Mary Trotter, which will be great. And then the do's and the don'ts of effectively managing difficult symptoms. I think, Jackie, you're doing that one, so we're grateful for you doing that. And then coming up in 2021, we're actually going to have Teepa Snow doing a presentation for 2 presentations, one in January and February, and that's going to be amazing to have her with us to do a presentation. So again, share this with your friends, family. It is amazing. This is my contact information. So again, if anybody needs resources on home care, looking at your long-term care insurance, information on neurologists, donating to the Alzheimer's Family Organization. I'm here. People do need to get a plan before the crisis. They do need to know what would happen to their loved one if they had a medical crisis, because things do happen. I can help with respite care, home care, hospice care. So again, I have lots of resources and I'm happy to help. Jackie, thank you, thank you. I have learned so much. You have a great presence, so thank you for sharing your gifts with us. We've learned a lot, and we're grateful for all your knowledge. Thanks for sharing.
For all you do.
You stay safe.
Yes, everybody stay safe.
Yeah. And again, our presentation is on the website, and if anybody wants to hear it or share it with families, please look that up. All right, so we will see you then in a couple weeks. So be well, be safe. Hugs to everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.